Good listeners, this is a short introduction to the short story. The genre of short story in English literature gained popularity and importance around the 19th century. Populist issues that concern common man are central to the short stories. Short stories talk about human tendencies, sentiments, emotions, morality, and idea of justice. These prose pieces define people, places, and times. Though the epicenter of popularity of short story was England, there was an emergence of this genre in France, Spain, Soviet Union, and many other countries. The short stories across the globe present new word, not only new word, but also new viewpoints which convey social messages to the public in a very sophisticated manner. They connect people to history. Not only do these stories connect people to history, but they also connect them to the contemporary times. Many notable works of East and the West, whether in France, Russia, or any Oriental context, were translated into English, and the contents of the majority of these short stories convey messages of social and political changes of the world. Short stories also gained popularity because of their compact form. According to Kate Atkinson, the story is a genre in its own right. It's not the little sister of the novel. So, no doubt, the stories are also popular because reading of the stories involves lesser time. Stories, according to Joyce Carol Oates, represent, within quotes, a concentration of imagination and not an expansion. This is to be noted very carefully that the stories might be short in terms of the words that are used in the narrative, but they are a concentrated form. The concentration of imagination, and it is not the expansion of imagination. Novel is a discursive that develops ideas, not only one idea, but many ideas which might be interwoven into the whole fabric of the plot. While the novels, it is observed, may begin with the seed in the soil, reveal the sprouting, flowering, bearing of fruits, and even the withering away of a plant, the short stories show the buds blossoming into flowers. Though the short stories narrow down to capture a speck of dust and disclose a hidden word, it has a protean form. So you cannot measure the actual understanding of a story by just the word count. This concentrated form of imagination is also capable of showing the buds blossoming into flowers. So the stories comprise of an infinite variety of plots, variation, deep thoughts. Many short story writers, in fact, violate the traditional plots in a story to concentrate more upon the fleeting moments and their effects on the consciousness of man. Any story that emphasizes on the inner consciousness transforms the word view. The two stories that I have to take up, The Bet by Anton Chekhov and God Sees the Truth But Waits by Leo Tolstoy, are stories that will take you into the inner consciousness of the characters. Not only will these stories lead you into the inner consciousness of the characters, but will also take you into the inner recesses or the inner layers of the functioning of the society, certain institutions, and certain practices. So the stories that emphasize on inner consciousness have the great potential to not only transform your worldview, but will also leave an indelible mark on you, the readers. Not only you, me, and everyone. Short story is a medium that enables an exploration of hidden possibilities that may usher changes in the world. So there are several reasons for the popularity of the short stories, whether it is the brevity or it is a single read or it is telling the tales of human history and cultures, which were not only important in the past, but hold some significance even in the present and can shape and mold the future of the societies and individuals. So reading stories enhances several skills, whether it is the critical thinking, language learning, reading skills, writing skills, learning of the rhetoric, the art of persuasion, or how you have to understand the philosophical values of life. Short stories enable the readers to see the word in a grain of sand. And this is within quotes. A grain of sand is a word used by William Blake in one of his writings. So this grain of sand, writes Stephen Milauser in his essay, The Ambition of the Short Story, is the story's salvation. So whatever is represented in this as a grain of sand, is reflecting the whole society. This is the story's salvation, which Milauser refers to in one of his essays. So this grain of sand contains the word in entirety. When one concentrates on an apparently insignificant aspect of the word or some sort of life, one finds that this is nothing less than the word itself, because the short story has the power to unravel the hidden, and it also has the power to lead to great transformations. Catherine Patterson argues that there are books and stories which provide a basis for democracy of intellect. Now, this democracy of intellect is very important, because only if you have a very democratic way of thinking can you rise above the narrowness, selfishness, and the biases. So the stories will give readers a good lot of wisdom. These are means of education. These are passed from one generation to another, so they carry the human experiences and lessons that human beings have learned in the past. Jerome Bruner, in his book Actual Minds, Possible Words, describes two ways of mental functioning. He writes, the one way in which our brain functions is a propositional way of thinking, and the other one is a narrative way of thinking. So both these ways of mental functioning enable people to order their experiences and make meaning of the events in their lives. But there is a little bit of difference between these two ways of thinking. The propositional thinking is concerned with the cause and effect thinking. If then the reasoning or the logical scientific kind of thinking, it is abstract and it is independent of the context. On the other hand, the narrative thinking is embedded and enmeshed in the events, place, time, and people. It is more concrete and it is context dependent. No doubt, the narratives also convey lots of ethical issues to enhance the moral understanding of human beings. Vainsy Booth, in one of his books, The Company We Keep, An Ethics of Fiction, observes that writers teach virtues through narratives while giving pleasure. So stories enhance the ethical reasoning and engage the learners in various ethical dilemmas. And you will see in both the stories the bet and God sees the truth but waits. There is an ethical dilemma. And probably, when I I assume that you've already read the stories and we are going to discuss it in the coming classes. These are certain ways of thinking or certain conflicts, which have been ailing the society since time immemorial, centuries back, whether it was 17th century or it was the 18th century. So these accounts take the readers to the dark regions of the soul and confront them with their fears and show them a manner, a way, or a possibility to conquer or overcome these fears. So the story will capture the attention of a reader and will transport him or her to a world. It will of where he will formulate and reformulate his way of thinking. And in this way, the stories or the narratives or a narrative thinking ignites the moral imagination, which will enable human beings not only to measure themselves against the character of the story, but also they'll try to live in these characters to know their moral struggles, defeats, and victories. And yes, when we come across the conflict between the banker and the lawyer and how, the character of the lawyer is emerging in the story, The Bet by Anton Chekhov, there are so many lessons to be learned besides the fact that the story is dealing with the conflict, which has been raging since centuries, whether the execution, the capital punishment should be given or it should be a life imprisonment. So Wayne Booth is also of the opinion that the vicarious experiences of the literary characters help the readers to construct their personality. So stories enable us to understand human situation, human condition, and interpret life. While shaping our lives, the stories are also, telling us about the moments of courage, the moments of glory, and several moral issues through which the readers can make their own inferences and choices for life. These stories possibilize certain ways of living, which are an alternative way to the prevalent mode or the dominant way of thinking, or something, uh, which is sustained as a practice which is to be continued from one generation to another. So the literary works, whether this is the genre of story or the drama or the novel, is seeking a reflective understanding of life, because one cannot read fiction as a gossip of imagination or gossip of imaginary people, because the fictional works are about the philosophy of life, and they blend the reality with fiction. Bernard Williams suggests that the ethicists use literature as example or an illustration to support their philosophical claims. Sometimes the philosophers find literature the most useful and natural place for the philosophical study of a case. So they turn to fiction for reflections on an ethical life. So the literary case studies in ethics represent as an observation, as an absence, and also a moral thinking. So the purpose of reading these short stories is to gain insights, also to deliberate on certain ways of living, conduct that shape the orientation of the individuals and society. So narratives play a very pivotal role in directing the attention of the reader on perfection of selves. Thank you.